Hi everyone, this is Ellie Mae with Artesprix, and in today's video I'm going to share how we can combine some techniques to create with the Artesprix Sublimation apron. So this is going to be a larger project. I'm going to go through the supplies really quickly so you know what I am using, and make sure to check out the links in the video description for additional information on the supplies. I'm actually going to be using copy paper. It is basic, plain, ordinary copy paper. That is all you need with the Artesprix Sublimation products, but I will be using possibly about two sizes, so letter size, and then this is a larger surface, so I may also utilize an 11 by 14. If you don't have that, you can get by with the letter size as well. I'm going to be using the Artesprix Sublimation apron, along with adding in a design cut on the heat resist transfer mask. These are really super cool. I can't wait to share with you how I use that. And then I just grabbed some stencils. This is just going to be whatever you have in your stash or you'd like to use. Take the ideas and see what works with your supplies. Then you're going to also need the Artesprix protective paper. This is a very important part of the product to be able to protect your heat surface and not get sublimation ink anywhere, especially when we're working with this larger surface. You're going to need this to protect both bottom and top. Then I'm going to be using the Artesprix heat tape. This is specially designed for the high heat that sublimation needs to be pressed at. We are going to be pressing this apron at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 60 seconds. I am going to be combining the Artesprix sublimation markers. I have the chisel tip black marker sitting upright, and you want to have this sitting upright for about 20 minutes, especially if you haven't used these markers on a regular basis. That allows the ink to flow to the tip, and then make sure to get that ink flowing before you start. So we'll do some of that with a scrap piece of copy paper. And then we're going to make a mess. Well, I'll make a mess. You don't have to. I'm going to be using the Artesprix Sublimation acrylic paint, and using that with a sponge combined with the stencils will create a design. Random, have fun with this, play around. I'm going to be making an art apron, so the more mess that I can create on that it looks like on the apron, I think it's going to turn out great. So I just have a sponge. I'm going to cut this into pieces to use with the different colors of ink. You could then wash out the sponges after, but for the video's sake, I'll be using different colors just so it's faster. Basic supplies that you'll need: a ruler, pencil. Pencil does not transfer to your sublimation blank, so it's great for either sketching or for drawing out your templates. Scissors, and I already mentioned that. Again, that's the most important part. Spatula for working with. I'm going to be using letters that I have cut out. If you can see this on the camera, I have cut this out. I'm going to show you how I did that. This is that heat transfer resist mask, and since my letters are individual, I'm going to be using just a reusable transfer tape that I have from my adhesive vinyl that I've just grabbed out of my scrap pile. So I think that's all. So let's go ahead and get started and see what kind of mess we can make. Project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this apron so we can measure it out and see where we want the bulk of our design. Now I am going to try to cover a majority of this apron, and as you can see, it is an adult sized apron, so it is large, so it's not going to fit all on the camera. There's just no way I can do that in my space, so I might need to move some of this out of the way just a little bit. So large apron. If you are only doing the middle section, decorating the middle section, let's get this flat here. You can utilize just a sheet of letter size, fits perfect. It just depends on what your design is. So you can center that right here at the very top, and you could also use it with a my normal heat press that I use in the videos is 9 by 12. That would work, and I'd still be able to do it with a smaller press. It's just going to take more presses. Once I get to the pressing stage, I'm actually going to move this to my 15 by 15 heat press just because I plan to do the whole apron. I'm going to show you how I plan to do that, and then speed up the video, time lapse it to show the finished project. Have fun, create, take your time, see what can happen. Now, the first thing I want to start with is I started with measuring my design. So I grabbed my ruler, and you want to measure where you want your main focal point of your design, if you do have a focal point. So measure that, and keep in mind that when the apron's on, it's going to form to a human body. So it's going to curve around. So you don't necessarily want a word that is the entire length here, side to side, because that's going to wrap around the person when they tie it. So I'm going to focus centered here. Great part about this is there's pretty much a center line right here, so I can get an idea of that. So I can measure here, and I know for myself, since I will be the one wearing this apron, I don't typically go over a 9-inch design as the focal point. When I say focal point, what I mean is I have cut a design out of this heat resist transfer mask. I used my silhouette cutting machine, and I cut a design out of this that I am then going to place onto my copy paper that I'm sublimating, putting the sublimation paint on. And I am going to use this. It's going to resist the sublimation ink, and it's going to leave that section of my blank white. So it's going to stand out, it's going to pop. And then I'm going to use the marker to add a little bit more flair to that. So that is the idea I've shared with you from inside my head. Here is a look in the Silhouette Studio software of the design. I did flip the design horizontal, or mirror the design, and then I cut the design using the Silhouette machine. So you could do this either with a machine, you could use die cuts as well, or you could simply hand cut whatever your design is. So you can kind of see this. I have left it without weeding it, so I can show you that process. On the back side of this heat transfer resist mask is a little, it's already cut for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna weed this off. And with a good cut, you don't even really need a weeding tool. I'm just weeding my outside edges. And then I'm gonna lay this down flat and just peel this excess away. Now, if you're careful, you could actually use this. That is where the middle is. I could have put the transfer tape on top, but I'll just line them back up. If you're careful, you could even use the negative of this on a project. So I might set that aside. You do want to keep the insides of your letters, so you would want to keep those as well. Let me just set that aside. Maybe I'll think of something. You could use it on a tote bag. So here's the piece that was for the A. Just gonna try to keep that organized. And then I have my letters for that set aside. This is my letter design. I'm going to take my piece of transfer tape, and since that was in the center, I just line it back up. Hopefully, I'm going to actually move this because sometimes the camera does not focus on white. So you can see this a little bit better. This is just a silicone mat to protect my workspace. So here is my letters. Now, what you might notice is that they are backwards. I did flip horizontal because words, when you put it onto your copy paper, it needs to be mirrored so that when you flip it over and put it onto your blank, it will read correctly. So I am just going to start on one side here with my transfer tape. This is just normal, everyday transfer tape that I use for adhesive vinyl. And I'm a little bit off here, but it's going to work. This is just going to allow me to transfer everything all at the same time. I reuse my transfer tape until it's no longer sticky. And I'm just going to press that, burnish it down. Very similar to if you're working with adhesive vinyl. Now the back side, when I peel this away, these letters are going to be sticky. It's going to stick to the transfer tape, hopefully. Just go slow and you can push it down if needed. It doesn't have to stick for too long. You just don't want the design to move. So there's one piece of that clear sheet. And then rolling it back at an angle can help it release also. So now I have my design all on one piece. I'll bring my white copy paper and hopefully that'll focus. And then here is my design. So I can place this and then stick that to my copy paper. Just make sure you're not using a high tack transfer tape or it could tear your copy paper. One that's been used a couple times is a great, like I said, I reuse this until it's no longer sticky. So then I just put the backing, put a backing on so that I can reuse it again. So now I have my design. I can add my colors around it. When I press this, the areas where this heat resist mask is are going to remain white on my blank. Future me popping in here. If you want it to be white on the blank, make sure to remove the heat resist mask from your copy paper before you press. You'll see in this video later on that I did not, but I came out with a unique look. So I'm going to go ahead and going to try this out. I'm going to use, because I'm going to be using the paints, so it's a little bit more liquid, and I'm also going to be using the sponge. So I'm going to roll this out. I'm just going to use a piece of this protective paper as my art palette. And I want to make sure not to get it on my blank, but I can maybe take some colors here and just hold that down. Use my mat. Just hold that protective paper down. Now I'm going to use this as my palette because then it's not going to be, I'm out of paper plates, which is what I would normally use. And it's going to be able to hold that paint and safely keep it off of my workspace. And then I'm just going to cut this up into a few pieces. Again, you could wash it out, and I will wash all the sponges out and reuse them. But for the video, I'm just going to use different colors. And then it is up to you how you create your own custom individualized apron. And I don't even know really how many I'm going to work with here. So I'm just cutting up a bunch of pieces. I don't need a whole lot. I just need the texture and to pick up the paint. I'm going to open my stencils. And then you can just decide what you would like around your design. Probably not, personally, probably not going to do the honeycomb around it because it's going to be broken up. But I could do some of these paint splatters. This one actually is what I'm looking for right here. So I can just go ahead. I'm going to put that stencil down there. And I'm going to stencil. You can change out the stencils. You can change out the colors. So I'm just going to add some paint on here and sponge that out. So let's start with, what do I want at the top? I do want it to be a bright, let's start with pink. So I'll just put some of this, oh, that's not pink, that's red, pink. And I'm just gonna, less is more. You can always add more paint in. You can't take it away. But if you do get excess, just grab a sheet of copy paper and add it to the copy paper so that you could use it at a later date. Now I'm going for a messy look here, so don't overthink this. It is an art apron, so that's kind of what I'm going for. If you do want it to be more uniform, you definitely can. That is the great part about these supplies, is you are not limited. You can just create art to your heart's content. Even if you don't think that you can create art, you definitely can with these products. It's just a matter of letting go and playing. Lift that up, and then maybe I'll do another It'll do it down over here. I do want to be careful of that. So I might just, I don't want to do it the same direction, but let's put it this way. And I'll get some more paint. So I'm going to continue with this manner using the stencils and then adding more colors. And I'll speed up this video so you don't have to watch the entire process of paint drying. So here's a quick look at sponging on additional ink. You do want to let each layer or color dry. Use an extra sheet of copy paper and you can pick up your excess paint. And then I would just sponge another color over top of that. Again, I'm going for this messy look. So even if I had colors bleed through, that was okay for my project here. And then you can just wipe off the stencil with a wet wipe, or when I was finished, I would just take it to the sink and clean it off completely and then let it dry before I started again. Now, once you have the main part of your design, like I said, I'm going to try to fill the apron, but the best part of a video like this is that I can movie magic it and you don't have to watch paint dry or me put paint on. So you do whatever works for you. We have this heat resist mask here. I'm going to take my marker and a scrap sheet of copy paper. So the marker has been point down for 20 minutes or longer. And I'm using the chisel tip here. You can use fine tip or chisel tip. I'm just simply going to make sure my ink is flowing. And one of the best parts about having the chisel tip is you can use the wide part or you could use the fine tip for your projects. So it works great for tracing things. So I'm going to do a little outlining here around my heat transfer resist mask. And I want to do this without thinking about it. I am not trying to go for perfect. I want it to be kind of a scribble. I want it to be, you know, just have fun with it. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to trace around the outer edge. And if it's outside of around my lines, that's fine. I'm actually looking for kind of the scribbled effect. And then what I find if I'm going to do two, I go two different directions just so that my hand isn't trained around the design of that. So you're not getting in the same lines. I'm going for an out of bounds effect. We'll see what it turns out like. So I'll speed this part of the video up a little bit while I finish tracing out my letters. Now go with the flow, have fun with your creation, and remember, if you want the white space to show underneath, because I stamped on top of it, you would need to remove the heat resist mask before pressing. Now, if the marker hit an area of paint and kind of skipped, I went with the flow. I just let it go with that. I want to see how this will turn out. We'll see what it looks like. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use these same exact techniques to add more designs to fill up my apron. I'm going to grab some larger sheets of copy paper, and I'm just going to continue using some random stencils, create some different effects. Since I don't have the text to worry about there, I can just go with the flow, have some random patterns of different things for my apron. Now, once I have all of my pieces, I did some individual pieces. I'm going to use some scissors and cut these out, and I can place them a little more strategically. So I have a couple sheets that I did with different colors. And then I have 3 of these large, these are actually 11 by 17, but I have some space around it to cut around so I can just kind of puzzle piece this all together and get an idea of what it's going to be like for my apron. So like I said, you can either do the full, just the front up here in the top for the apron. I will link in the video description below the last video I did showing that design that I did on the top of the apron. This time I decided to try to do the full apron. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to press this on my large heat press because it is a larger surface. I am going to pre-press the apron, then I'm going to use a lint roller on it. But first, I want to grab my printouts or my pages, and I kind of want to lay this out so I can get an idea of the areas that I can fill in, and I want to press it as strategically as possible to maximize the space and make it look somewhat disorganized and not so linear. So I'm going to be doing some cutting of designs. So these ones I designed specifically so that I could just take some scissors and cut these around closer to the design so that I could then place them closer around the areas that might be needing some additional. Now you don't want it to overlap any part of the design, but you can get an idea and lay it all out before you go to press. Once you press, it is permanent. So remember that all of your designs are going to be mirrored. So while I have it this way, it is actually going to show up this direction. So I can strategically place some of these. If I cut around this design, which I'll do, I can place this up here so it gives it a little bit of filling in those white spaces. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to strategically place all of these with this design. I'll just flip this one over so we can get a visual of it. I'm going to cut around this design. Let's go ahead and do that. I actually want to come in. I don't want this I don't want the sharp white straight edges down here. So I'm going to cut those off so that it's not quite so linear, and then just kind of go around my design. And if there's a section that was kind of smeared, that not necessarily was part of the design, this one, anything could be part of the design. But if there was, you could just cut that off. Like for instance, this section right here, cut that off and it's not going to sublimate. Let's cut this around here. And then you can see I have a little bit more space to work with around the design where I could place additional things. And I could always add to it. I'm gonna try to fill the space to be able to press it on my 15 by 15 press all at once in certain areas. I won't be able to do the whole apron at the same time. But for instance, this one I kind of already played around with the alignment. I'm gonna cut around this so it's a little bit more, you know, finer detail, but this will be actually flipped. And when I did it before, figure out how I did this. I think it was this way. So I could get my design up in this corner and I have this design down in here. So you can kind of play around with your placement. There is no wrong way to do this. So I'm going to do that and we'll speed it up. And then the first thing I'm actually going to press will be this top section, and I will come back with that section as I get ready to press. Now here's a quick look at the process. It did take some time because I am filling this entire full apron with designs. I did cut apart the designs and then kind of jigsaw puzzle pieced them together. I'm a very linear person, so I was really trying to spread these out, not make them have lines or the linear look to it. Even if I try, sometimes that doesn't work. But next I would pre-press any of your garments that you're going to be sublimating on. You want to get any moisture out and then use a lint roller to pick up any dirt or debris. Dirt or debris will show up when you're sublimating as little blue dots. So if you have ever seen that after you have pressed a sublimation print, that can indicate that there were fibers or dirt, debris that not really that you can see typically. So you do want to pre-press it and then lint roller it. And then the very important part of the process is your protective paper. And I am using a 15 by 15 heat press. So I am using 2 sheets on the bottom and 2 sheets on the top for each press. If you get sublimation ink that bleeds through or comes through on the protective paper, you do not want to reuse that. That can transfer either to your top platen, bottom platen, or to your blank, which is not what you want to happen. So it is best just to use a clean, fresh sheet. Now, the bottom I did not have to replace at all, but I did replace the top every single time I pressed. So since this is a large apron, I did have to press in multiple presses, and that just takes a little bit of practice. Here is a quick look at the reveal of the top section of this design, and it turned out great. The colors are amazing. Here's where I realized that I screwed up. So don't tell, I screwed up. It wasn't my original intent I wanted the white letters, but it still turned out great. It's unique. Nobody else has an apron like this. Every one you create is going to be different. So then I just added and started puzzle piecing this together, adding the heat tape to keep that secure. You do want to keep it as secure as possible. If any of that moves, you can have ghosting with your press. And I did get a little bit of that, as you'll see in the end. I will admit that right away, but I don't know if that was just not taped well enough or if it was just, it moved during the process. So here's a quick look at putting the protective paper on, and then I just pressed it in sections that would fit on my 15 by 15 press. Here is a real-time look at the top layer of the sublimation protective sheet. If you can see that there is ink on that. So you do want to replace that when you go to press the next section. So I replaced it with new protective paper to protect my heat press. Now the exciting part of the full reveal of this, we'll see how it looks. There's a couple places, but I'm going for the messy look. So there's a couple places you can see the pressure wasn't quite right pressing this large design, but it looks like a messy craft apron. You can create all kinds of possibilities with this. Hopefully you can see most of it in the picture. And you have a custom apron that is unlike anyone else's. Even if someone's doing the same exact thing as you are, this is completely different. No two are alike. And if you do have extras, you can just hang on to those for a future project. Don't throw those away. They are perfectly good. Just keep them somewhere safe, and you can use those for a future project. So here is a close-up look of the full apron design. Once you have it on, I don't see that linear side of me as much, and it is a unique design, very vibrant, bright colors for an art apron. Now, any extras that you had of your paint, don't throw it away. Here's my extras. Here's my pickup from the excess paint that I had and the stencil. You can reuse this, save this for future projects. Now, whether you do a full apron or just a simple design on the very front of your apron, have fun with it. Make sure to check out the links in the video description below and the Artesprix blog and website for additional inspiration.